Liam is on the right. He's a fellow Australian. In the middle, Kun Pei, one of the divers, and just here, Ivan, who is also one of the divers. Now, we're going to start with some short videos just to get you in the feel of what was going on up there. And then each of the panellists will have a short say, and there'll be a chance after for everyone to ask a question if you like.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for coming along. I'm going to play 3 short clips. All of them come from the ABC Australia documentary, which was put together by Four Corners in a week after the boys were rescued. It was an incredible achievement to put together something that still holds up in terms of its accuracy and giving us a sense of what happened, who the characters were. So 3 clips, an introduction, a bit about the rescue and a bit about the result, just to get us in the mood again, remind us who the characters were, and prepare us for this talk.
The squadron called and said, "Hey sir, I'm sure you're tracking that there's a soccer team stuck in a cave in Thailand."
It's a long way in. Most of them don't even know how to swim, let alone dive, and we're all wondering how this is going to possibly work. And to be honest, the prospects are bleak.
So we go into the cave and it was completely dark, but I could just sense like, oh my gosh, there's like 12 children and a coach in here. And I'm just in the entranceway and I'm spooked out. I can't even imagine.
Talking to a lot of the experts that do cave diving as a hobby, we're like, man, this is one of the 5 most dangerous caves I've ever been in my career. And that was kind of, the hair stands up on the back of your neck.
The first thought is they're not going to get out. I mean, the kids, we've done recoveries before with live people, and it's all about panic underwater. I was always confident we could get them out. It was getting them out alive.
And in my mind, the possibility, the probability of success was about as low as you can get.
So you thought there's no chance of getting the 13 out?
I didn't think that there was no chance, but when I was flat out asked, what do you think the probability of success was, I told the governor I thought maybe a 60 or 70% chance. So I was fully expecting that we would accept casualties, maybe 3, 4, possibly 5 would die.
It's now Sunday, the 8th of July. The 12 boys and their coach have been trapped for 15 days. The conditions are getting worse as the monsoon closes in. There's a growing sense that it's now or never.
ความพร้อมถึงพีคสุดแล้ววันนี้เราปฏิบัติการดีเดย์นะครับเมื่อ 10 โมงที่ผ่านมาเจ้าหน้าที่ดำน้ำผู้เชี่ยวชาญดำน้ำถ้ำจำนวน 13 คนนะครับได้เข้าไปปฏิบัติการเพื่อช่วยชีวิตน้องๆเขาออกมานะครับแล้วก็ซีลไทยอีก 5 คนนะครับปฏิบัติโดยมีการ assignment ชัดเจนว่าเราจะเข้าไปอย่างไรแล้วก็จะกู้ชีพกู้ภัยน้องเขาออกมาอย่างไร
What about you, given your experience in your own mind as a cave diver? Were you 100% confident they'd all make it out? How did you feel?
No, the first operation, so it was a 3-day operation. The first operation, I was always confident we could get them out. It was getting them out alive.
นะครับผบ.เหตุการณ์นะครับใช้คำสั่งนี้ตามกฎหมายนะครับก็ขอเชิญทุกท่านนะครับที่ไม่เกี่ยวข้องตามที่ผมได้ประกาศนะครับออกนอกพื้นที่ตั้งแต่เวลานี้นะครับตั้งแต่เวลานี้
The Thai authorities order anyone not involved in the rescue operation to leave the area. The media is moved 500 metres away from the operations centre.
We're packing up everything.
นะครับขอยืนยันว่าน้องทั้ง 13 คนมีความพร้อมทางด้านร่างกายสูงมากนะครับจิตใจสูงมากเด็ดเดี่ยวมุ่งมั่นทั้ง 13 คนรับทราบภารกิจที่เราจะปฏิบัติแล้ว
As night falls, a fleet of ambulances arrive. There's 13 of them, one for each of the boys and their coach. The task of bringing the boys out will be the responsibility of a team of 13 foreign divers and 5 Thai Navy SEALs.
Be careful, okay?
It will take them 3 hours to make their way through the narrow, dark passages to reach the boys.
The main issue is, are these guys going to be taught to dive and dive out, or are they going to come out as a package and we're going to do everything for them? And it's really the former option wasn't going to be possible because of the language barriers and the fact that they're so young and so small. So they were going to have the whole thing done for them. So this is where the boys are here in Chamber 9. So there's a hill here.
Craig Challen will play a key role along the route of the rescue. But it is the unique skills of his friend, the anaesthetist Dr. Harris, that will be critical to the success of the mission.
And how are you keeping the boys calm?
Yeah, so they did have some sedation to keep them calm, because the worst thing that could happen would be one of those guys panicking. And if you put me in a full face mask with no previous experience and dragged me out of a cave for it's about a 3-hour trip, then I would be terrified and probably panicking as well. Yep, they were calmed down a bit.
Were they totally calm?
The best, yeah.
Yeah, so they were basically given an anaesthetic to knock them out and they take it?
Yeah, they were, there wasn't very much activity there.
Lovely bit of Australian understatement there from Craig Challen. They were given ketamine injections, but there was not much activity going on there. Let's skip a few important and dramatic steps and come to the result after the rescue, some of the celebrations, and pick up from that point.
The 18-day vigil is over.
5 out the last night. Yeah. It's an amazing story. How did you feel when you finally got that last member of the team?
Quite emotional, as we were getting closer and closer to the entrance, I got quite emotional. I don't normally, it's just what we were doing was to come out. Now I've got a kid myself now, so it was quite a good feeling.
You know, you had the last group of people come out, and then we knew all 4 Thai SEALs came out, and everybody was all standing there around 10 o'clock at night. And we actually took a moment and let the emotions come back in, and I think that it really kind of hit you in the feels, and we were like, man, we just accomplished something as a huge team. It took all these different people coming together, and I think that the world was watching one way or another,
Enormous sense of relief. And this is when it's good for the divers, because we get to just walk out of the cave and go home. Everybody else still had a lot of work to do. The Thai Navy guys still had to swim out, so they were another 2 to 3 hours behind.
The soccer team is safe, but there's a final moment of drama for the rescuers still inside the cave.
Yeah, I don't know if it was kind of a supernatural intervening, but one of the pumps back at Chamber 3 failed, and we had a fair amount of guys out there waiting for the last group of SEALs to come out, and we got the call, hey, water levels are rising fast. That was definitely a spike of adrenaline towards the end of the night.
For the Thai authorities who led this mission, it is a dream result.
ทีมไทยแลนด์ทีมราชการพร้อมเอกชนทีมสื่อมวลชนที่ช่วยกับเรารวมทั้งกำลังใจของทั่วโลกเราทำในสิ่งที่ไม่มีใครคาดคิดว่าเราทำได้เป็นครั้งแรกในโลกเป็นความภาคภูมิใจเป็นมิชชั่น possible ของทีมไทยแลนด์ที่ทำได้
All right, and let's leave it there now that we've all got our minds back in the cave. So my name is Liam Cochrane. I'm a journalist here in Southeast Asia, based in Bangkok, but covering Southeast Asia for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. What I want to do is just give you a little bit of information about my book and then hand over to these guys who were behind the scenes, so have much more interesting things to say, and will hopefully give you some insights into what went on behind the scenes in the rescue. So I arrived with my colleague Jum and cameraman David on the 2nd of July, and for once we timed it right. We got there in the morning, and later on in that evening was when the boys were found deep in the cave. Keep in mind that was 10 days since they went in there. No food. Incredible survival just to get that far in the chill depth of the cave, probably 3 or 4 kilometers inside the mountain. Even by that stage, there was an enormous media gathering outside the cave. It was a tent city. I found out later on from the Thai government that there were almost 700 foreign media people registered from almost 200 organizations, and that was just the foreign media. The Thai media was probably about the same again. But despite all of those journalists and cameramen and producers and everyone hungering for information, really we didn't know very much. We had limited access to the cave, which was blocked off by that stage. And most of what we knew came from twice daily press conferences from Governor Narongsak, who was just speaking at the end there. So we really had the surface level of the story. So when HarperCollins asked me to write a book about this, I really had to go back to the start and find as many people as I could who were involved and get the story. Because no one person really knew the full story about the cave rescue. All of the rescuers knew what was happening on the outside, but had no idea what was happening inside the cave with the boys. And of course, the boys had absolutely no idea of the efforts going on outside to try and find them and save them. So, it's fantastic to have both these guys here today, because Ivan was the first person that I interviewed for my book, and everything I know about cave diving is from you, Ivan, and everything that I got wrong, that's me, that's not Ivan. And Pei came very soon after that, and it was through you that I got to meet Naranton Nabanchang and found out a bit more about some of the volunteerism and the huge efforts that some of the Thais went to gather equipment and get that to the mountain and make sure that was there for the Navy SEALs and for the volunteer divers like Ivan and the others on the Euro team to use. And I hope you guys can talk a bit more about that. It was a really challenging story to tell because no one knew the full story, and because by that stage access was quite difficult. The key thing that everybody wanted was to get an interview with the boys, and that was incredibly difficult to do. It took myself and my team of 4 researchers the entire time that I had to write a draft, which was 6 weeks, and then an extra week to get that. We did that through relationships that we built from that time, and you'll read about that in the book if you've got one. But it was an incredibly difficult thing to get and gave us so many insights. And I'll just give you a couple of brief examples. We thought that the boys and the coach would have been in the darkness the whole time, that would have been part of the fear factor of being trapped in a cave. But when we met with the boys, they told us that actually they did have torches. And in fact, on the first night, when they realized they'd been blocked by the water and the debris, they went to sleep that night and lay down on the damp mud. And they were in a place that's nicknamed the Planetarium in Thai. It's one of the many nicknames of various stages throughout the cave. And there was nothing more they could do. They tried to dig their way through. They thought they heard voices, so they thought people were looking for them. So they just decided to go to sleep and save their energy. And one by one, they turned their torches off. And all except Note's torch would not turn off. He had one of these newfangled LED torches, and it just wouldn't turn off. And so they went to sleep that night with the torch still on. And the reason it's called the Planetarium, this spot in the cave, is because the calcite crystals in the roof glitter. So they had this rather poetic image, they told me, of their first night going to sleep looking at what looked to them like the stars. And amazingly, that torch stayed on for 4 days. I don't know who the manufacturer of that torch is, but I think there's a pretty good sponsorship arrangement that someone could work out. The other thing that gave me a great insight into what happened behind the scenes was speaking with John Volanthen, who was one of the 2 British divers who found the boys. And he was the one wearing the camera that I'm sure we've all seen the footage of that moment that they were found deep in the cave. And he's the one, when they ask, how many there, he's the one in that fantastic British accent who says, "Brilliant." So after I'd written a draft of my book, I sent passages that related to John to him and said they were very reluctant to talk. These guys don't like the media so much, most of the British cave divers, and had ignored several requests that I'd made for interviews. So I thought, this is my last chance. I'll send John the stuff that relates to him. And he got back to me very quickly and told me all the things that I had wrong. And very generously then spoke to me for about 6 hours, describing in detail what actually happened in various stages of the rescue, and then reviewed some of those changes, and we made sure that I had it right, and we talked for another hour. And I'm so thankful that I did that, because otherwise parts of the book would have just been plain wrong. One of the other things that I tried to do with the book, is to try and get some of the Thai flavors in there. It was an incredible thing to experience as a correspondent. We saw unbelievable generosity of spirit up there in front of the cave. The volunteerism was incredible, and I'm sure many of you have seen the images of tents with food cooking and goods being given out. You could get anything you wanted, and it was all for free, and it was all done with amazing cheerfulness, and there was a sort of a strange festive spirit really in front of the cave, despite the seriousness of the operation that was going on. So I tried to get some of those Thai flavors out, like why the boys had their nicknames, why were they called Bill, and why were they called Titan, and also another thing that fascinated me, the appearance and the role of the monk Kruba Bunchum, and the way that fitted into the spiritual understanding of the mountain that many Thais had. And so hopefully I got some of that across and gave a bit of a flavour of that in the book. I'll leave it there, and please ask any questions you want, and I'll hand over to Pei next.
Oh, hi. Basically, I didn't prepare anything for today because I didn't think I have to speak anything. I was there on the first, basically on Monday evening. The reason I went up there the first time, because I heard about the news on Sunday, but I didn't really pay attention much at all. But on Monday morning, I saw in the news the 2 Navy SEALs try to get in, carried just single tank on their back, and I thought, wow, they're going to die basically. So because they don't have any experience, they didn't train for the cave diving, or they didn't have even the right equipment. So actually, to be honest, at that time, I didn't think about those boys at all. Basically, I was just thinking about how to help the SEALs to be able to get in there safely without killing themselves. And I have the knowledge, I have all the equipment, and I have the network of the divers and technical divers that we can help. I guess that's my first main reason that I went up there. So I get to talk to my sister. She's the assistant to Kunarinthon, she's an old superstar that have a lot of connection, and she be able to get a hold of someone up there in Chiang Rai, and that's how everything got started basically. So I didn't hear anything the whole day basically until late in the afternoon. All of a sudden, I was picking up my daughter at the school, and all of a sudden I got a call say, hey, we need to go right now. We have to catch the flight at 7 o'clock. And when I got the call, it was 5 p.m. already. So, but we made it to the airport and went up there. So since I never heard of this cave before, I kind of get in there, get the information. Originally, before I arrived, I thought, how hard could that be? And before I went up there. Actually, I called up my manager because I need to take some vacation off to do this. So I called my manager up and say, hey, well, can I get 3 days off? Because at that time I thought, man, 2 to 3 days top, probably we get this done, right? But I was so wrong basically. 3 days passed, and I called my manager up again. Can I get 3 more days off? And it ended up about 2 weeks that I went back to work. Yeah. So so the first impression that I got up there, back on the first day, actually it's pretty quiet. Not a whole lot of news media or anything at all. Like on Monday night that I arrived, it's very quiet. Only the Thai Navy was stationed up there. Everything is so quiet. I couldn't do anything much on Monday night. So I gather all the information, start calling all my friends, all my cave divers and instructor, and see what we can do to help, and start thinking about the process and procedure, what we need to do to help them. Due to the distance from the entrance to all the way where we thought the kids were, it actually it's really long distance at that time. So on Tuesday morning we went back again, and I met Lieutenant Boone, he was in charge at that time. He was surprised because he didn't know that why I went up there and what I can do to help. So I explained to him about the equipment and what we can do, and all the knowledge. And I guess the thing that I said, it was right, and he said, "Great, you go in with them." So that's how I end up inside a cave at 6 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, going up along with them, basically give them the crash course on how to set up the equipment and everything, and start working with the SEALs team since then. The first day, on the Tuesday, when the first time that I went in, actually we went all the way in. We have to carry, because at that time we don't have a lot of volunteers, so everybody have to carry your own gear. So, and that's another thing that I didn't really expecting to be that hard of work. So I brought all my full gear, which is about 70 kilos worth of gear. So I got 30 kilo on my back and another 30 kilos in the back that we have to carry through about almost 2 kilometers in from the entrance to almost to the T-junction at that time. Because on the first week, basically on the Tuesday, it's still all dry and we still can walk all the way to almost to the T-junction. That's when we start diving in the first time. But I mean, the situation got worse. The rain didn't stop and got the underground water that's feeding in so quickly. Since Tuesday morning, in the afternoon, we have to retreat back so far. So the distance between where we start diving to the buoy is becoming farther and farther away. And eventually, you probably saw some of the news. By Wednesday, that is completely flooded all the way to the first chamber or to the entrance. And we couldn't go back in until we got the breakthrough on Saturday. On Saturday, that it's a big D-Day, because when the water level is actually stable, not going up anymore. So that's really good news. So that's when we try to go back in and try to penetrate into the T-junction again, because it actually it was our first concern is at that time we thought the T-junction gonna get blocked, because due to amount of water and sediment and everything that flowing through, it might block the T-junction. If it's blocked, that means there's no other way to reach out to the buoys. That's why our first mission is try to get to the T-junction and to check the condition, how it is. And we did the breakthrough on Sunday, that we're able to lay down the guideline past the third chamber and almost the T-junction on Sunday evening. And then we went back again on Monday, continue laying down the line, pass through the T-junction. That's when the UK team got their turn going in and found the boy on the Monday evening. So, and then after that, we start preparing and see what are the options and the plans and how we're gonna bring them out, right? So that's and after that, most of the people probably heard the story already, how they brought all the boys out, and so that's when the Ivan also get involved, because you were arriving on Tuesday, right after found the boys.
Yes.
Yep. Go ahead.
I arrived the same day that the boys got found, but to go a little bit back, I like most of you, I also heard about the story first from the media. I was sitting with another of the divers in Krabi, and we were actually preparing a cave dive. He was about to instruct some new cave divers in a scenario that had a lot to do with this. We were actually practicing something we call a lost diver scenario, which is one of the training exercises you do to become a cave diver. Getting lost in the caves is something that happens. But usually it's not an emergency, because we have training, we have procedures both for the lost diver, how he can reconnect with the group, the line, but also for the rest of the group, how they have the best potential to find the divers. And we were sitting and briefing these aspiring cave divers on how you do that, and which procedures, how you use your equipment and so on to maximize your chances of finding a lost diver. And in the background was a television and the resort we were sitting, and there was this news about a few people being lost in a cave somewhere in northern Thailand. But back then the news were not as precise as they happened later. But I do remember that Paul, which was the instructor there, he contacted somebody, I believe it was Pei, he contacted and told that we were sitting here in far away. We had three already certified divers, myself and two others, and we had another 4 divers who were almost certified and would be ready to help very, very soon. And we offered our help, but this was the very early days, and back then it was not a dive mission. There was still reasonable hope that they will find the kids in the non-flooded part of the cave. And so the message back from whoever that was, don't worry guys, everything is under control. We're going to find them tonight or maybe tomorrow night. So we didn't think much about it. We went in and we did our cave dives, and these dives can take a long time. So I think we were back, 4 or 5 hours later. We came back and turned on the media again, and at that point, late at night, it's probably 9-10 o'clock local time, the news coverage was much more realistic. Okay, now the number 13 was there. There was a good idea that these guys were not just a few 100 meters in, they were probably kilometers inside the cave. And there was talk about the flooding and everything. And we offered our help, but as I said, it was not a diving situation yet. And we heard from the news that they brought up military divers, the Thai Navy SEALs, and I worked with, not the Thai Navy SEALs before, but I worked with similar Navy divers before, and these guys are really good divers, and they are pretty hardcore. Yeah, they don't get scared so easy. But I have never met a military diver that was a cave diver. So we knew that while they are very, very tough and very, very good divers, they simply don't have this specialized training, and they don't have the experience for diving in these overhead, and they probably don't have the equipment. But we wasn't sure because we didn't get much feedback from whoever was in charge at that point. So I went back to Koh Tao, where I live, and I have a business that do this kind of diving, and we have a lot of this specialized equipment. And we chose to, both my own company and other companies in the industry here that has this specialized equipment, we have various Facebook Messenger groups, and so we started to communicate and said, hey guys, if you have any equipment available, here's an address in Bangkok, you can send it up there. There is a few things you need to know. it's unlikely you will ever see your equipment again, and so on. So there was a long list of asterisks. But to be honest, I didn't get a single negative response from anyone I asked. I said, guys, do you have, we are not talking about 10,000 baht worth of equipment. We are talking about 200,000-300,000 baht worth of equipment. And people were told immediately, hey, you're probably never going to get your equipment. Are you okay? Yeah, well, give me the address. I'll send it now. And that was the attitude from 99.9% of the people that I spoke to. So we ended up sending a lot of equipment first up to Mae, I believe, in Bangkok, and then from Mae it was then sent on to Chiang Rai. And then for a few days I was like, I guess most of you, following the news intensely, especially because it has something to do with one of my hobbies, which is cave diving. And then we communicated in our various groups between instructors and cave divers here in Thailand, and we knew in hindsight even more that hey, for this operation to be successful, they need our specialized skills, but there was not an open invitation. So it actually ended up with some of us simply being so rested, saying, okay, well, let's just go up there. It's a few thousand baht to buy the plane ticket, and let's go up there. And now we're going to be there. It's going to be harder for them to say, no, go away, when we're sitting there. And I think that was what most of the volunteers did. We simply said, okay, let's get off. And like Mae said, it's just going to be a few days. We're going to go out there, and after 2-3 days, we're good cave divers. We're going to get the kids out. We had absolutely no idea that what kind of situation faced us. So I did, together with a good friend from Koh Tao, we bought the tickets and flew up there and met Mae and the team that was up there already. When they came out of the cave late at night, I think it was like 8, 9, 10 o'clock or something, and got the briefing for them. And I remember, I think it was Ben, another of the divers, he explained quite in depth about the conditions, and I went from being really optimistic, like, I can't wait to go diving tomorrow, to, this sounds a little bit dangerous, yeah, because when a diver with this experience level is shaking when he's telling about his experience, okay, I might end up shaking too if I go in there. And so it was, but the information, the amount of information we had was limited. We had the information from the divers up there, and all they could tell us was, you can't see anything, the water is really cold, and there's a lot of current. And none of these things are something that cave divers look forward to, But we were there and sat there and did our best to try to in the best Thai way to say, hey, we are here. If you need our help, just ask, and we can do whatever you need. We can carry tanks, we can cook food, we can wash your laundry, whatever. We are here to help in any way. But it did take at least, I think, almost 48 hours before the really activation. And again, with pace, negotiation, and translation. Not only the translation. I've been living in Thailand for 13 years, but I don't speak very well Thai, so I couldn't communicate. And it was not only a problem with communication between Thai and English. The biggest problem in communication was our terminology, trying to explain to these non-cave divers why we can't just use this type of regulator, why we can't use this type of tank and stuff that is totally uninteresting for people that are not cave divers, but it's life-saving for us cave divers, and it helped a lot having a cave diver that could translate not only to Thai, but also could translate why is it so important for these guys to get that specific thing, and why can they not use this and this? Every other diver uses this, yes, but every other diver is not a cave diver. We have specific rule sets that makes this very dangerous sport somehow safe. So we sat the first few days, and obviously it was, I remember I was honestly a little bit annoyed, I went up out there, took time off for my job, and the first day, 2 days, we just sat there and nothing happened. We spoke a lot, but there was no activation. And then suddenly the command came, and then people said, okay, now get ready. We were ready already. We were sitting in our wetsuits, we were sitting with our equipment, so we've been ready for 48 hours. And then we got the tragic news about Saman, that he lost his life in there. And I'm not a person that usually gets afraid. And I think that also the job I'm doing is a testament of that. But I remember when I heard that one of the Navy SEALs had died inside the cave. I think that was the first time I thought about, okay, this is not an everyday dive, you know. I would have expected any normal diver going in there, I would have expected them to die immediately. I would not have expected a trained SEAL to do it. So it put everything in perspective when a person with that kind of experience can be hit with whatever happened to Saman. Nobody knows that. But I remember that was the first time I thought, okay, this is real. This is dangerous. Ivan, it could be you tomorrow.
Actually,
having a problem.
To add to that too, just to get everybody into the perception how dangerous it is usually when you go into the normal cave, like the tourist cave, right? Everything nice and neat. You got the pavement, got the lights and everything. But the cave that we're going into, it's not tourist cave.
No, it's not.
But even though they said it is tourist cave, but it is not, because there's nothing about tourists that can be in there and safe on a regular day, right? Because there's no infrastructure, no light, no walkway. So if you slip, you'll fall and hurt yourself really bad. Or some of the location, for example, from the chamber 2 to chamber 3 is a lot of places that you can actually, if you doing any wrong step, you'll fall down and die. Basically, it was that bad. And on top of that, when it's flooded, during the normal cave environment, it's already hard to dive in there with the flooded cave, right? But before it flooded, the military and all the helper, they also pulling in the telephone wired cables, tubes, electrical wired, everything in there, which is make it more dangerous to the cave environment, because most thing that we also fear is get entangled and couldn't get out. So that's another thing that add on top of just current visibility, all the the jagged rocks and all the natural environment. Now you got the man-made environment in there that make it harder.
There was, like I said, there was obviously, when we have, again, all the respect for all the non-cave divers that helped, because they all did a lot for us, but it did not make our job easier, because there's a reason we follow these incredibly strict procedures, because if we don't, we simply die. We are inside an environment that if you try to go up to the surface, there is no surface, there is a ceiling, and there is like a kilometer of rock on top of you. It doesn't matter how long you can hold your breath, you're not getting out. So when emergency happens, it goes incredibly fast, and unfortunately, the vast majority of cases, they end with the person not surviving. And then adding very experienced divers, but without the specific cave knowledge, and they did mistakes. They used equipment that would say, I would never have used that kind of line or that kind of torch or whatever. And most of you will not understand, why can't we use it? It's a torch. Yeah, but we need this kind of torch because it has some specific use, and we don't like torches. As an example, most divers, they want to see everything. So they use a torch with a very wide beam. It illuminates everything, and you can see all the beautiful fish, and that's what most divers want to do. Us cave divers, we absolutely do not want these wide beams, because with this wide beam, when I put my torch anywhere, I will blind every other diver in the cave, and you don't get many cave diving friends if you do that every dive. So our torches, as an example, they are incredibly narrow beam, like 8-10 degrees, so they only illuminate exactly what I need to see, and everything else is kept in complete darkness, as it should be, because it makes it safer for the rest. And you wouldn't know something like this if you're not a cave diver. And this is just an example. There was many of these examples would say, yeah, that's exactly how any other diver would do. but we can't do this in the cave because it's not safe. But with Mae's help, they learn quickly. As I said, these guys, they are not bad divers. On the opposite, they are incredibly good divers, and their fitness level way superior to most of us on our dive team. So they learned quickly, and they started to use procedures that were cave-like, and eventually I would have no problem signing a few of them up as real cave divers, because they learn very quickly, and also the circumstances that was present, quick learning was required. You had to go very quickly. Yeah.
Actually, I want to add a little bit more when you mentioned about how quick learner they are. Because when they talk to some of them, they even though they Navy SEAL fully trained, right? But imagine to become the Navy SEAL, they have to practice and learn in the different tactics, right? So once they finish learning the tactical, physical, go learn diving, and then learn about parachuting and other stuff. So some of them, actually not some of them, I think most of the first squad that actually respond to the on the first day, none of them have been diving for 2 years. And some of them, they never been more than 20 dive and never been in cave. And imagine the first mission that they got thrown into that situation, it is all hard. I mean, really, it's really incredible how brave they are, that knowing that have been diving for 2 years, some of them been only 20 dive just to pass the course, to move on to the next level, and they, get into that mission. And another thing that I learned is, and I couldn't speak more about them, is those Navy SEALs that out there, they actually not being commanded to go there. They actually also volunteer as well. So basically, the commander say, okay, we have this situation, who volunteer to go there? And, all of them, they actually sign up for it.
So haven't you heard from Ben how bad the conditions were going to be? When you first got in there, how was it?
What I heard from Ben was, and that's something that scared me the most, he said, guys, don't worry about taking your fins up. You won't be diving in here. The only way to get into the cave is to pull the rope. And that's something that goes against everything, because one of the reasons we can survive these caves is we can move and we could go to wherever place we want to do. And the idea of going into a big cave and not being able to swim out, that scared me a bit. I don't like to dive without fins. Absolutely not. And then he told us the visibility, that's for non-cave divers, maybe that's something that's very scary. That's something cave divers we are quite used to. So not being able to see so much, not the biggest issue. Not being able to move to the place you want to be, that's a big issue. So the current was a much larger issue. Visibility is really nice if it's there. It's not a big problem if it's not. But the current was probably the biggest problem. For me personally, the temperature ended up being a big obstacle. I'm lucky, I'm doing all my diving here in Thailand. The ocean temperature in Thailand is between 30 and 29 degrees Celsius. So when you get used to that over a period of 12 years, something happens to your metabolism and so on. And then when you get put into 21 or 20, 22, whatever it was, for 12 hours, you get really, really, really cold. And I mean really cold. Really, really cold. So that was a big obstacle.
Yeah, and even when you get off the water, you still wet the whole day. I remember even for myself, I mean, only time that on average I think my body is only get 2 hours of dryness, and other than that it's just wet all the time.
And it's worth just reminding ourselves about the distances and the times involved. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was something like up to 6 hours in and 5 hours out. It was, as you say, 12 hours in the water.
I think the longest day we had was more than 12 hours. Obviously, it was not 12 hours underwater, but it was 12 hours being, as Mae say, being wet and being cold. Because inside the cave, the air temperature was about 20, I think, 21. And as you also can read in the book, there was enormous amount of food available outside of the cave. Nothing inside the cave. You know?
Actually, no.
And there was really good food. You know?
Inside the cave, we do have, the power bar.
Yes.
We have the energy gel.
Yes.
That's how we live off it. So you get
The power bars was
Power bar.
absolute. I'm not going to recommend them to anybody. They tasted incredibly bad. They were very sugary and very synthetic.
Believe it or not, because I'm not usually eat those power bars, but those during 2 weeks that I've been in doing the operation, I think I taste almost of all kind of flavors of the power bar and the energy
None
gel.
of them are good.
Yeah. Well, actually, I got this weird. I even have the durian power bar that coming, which is I'm not recommend that you guys do looking out for it. So,
Can you tell us perhaps a bit about what you and the other volunteer divers needed to do to prepare the cave and prepare for the rescue before it actually happened? Because we want to hear about that as well.
Before the rescue, one of the Euro team, which included people from Europe, Thailand, Russia, Canada, and all over the world. So it was not only Europeans, but the majority of the team was from Europe. And our mission to start with, so as I said, we arrived after the kids were found. And everybody was like, oh, the kids are found, mission accomplished. Not really. Now the mission actually starts. Now we know they're in there, and we know we actually have to bring them out, which, as you probably also can understand, is the hardest part of it. The distance into the kids is so far that it's not feasible for a diver to carry the amount of gas they need to get in and out safely. So what our mission was in the Euro team was to dive in roughly half, a little bit more than half, and then stage tanks on strategic points. So the divers that went all the way in, they knew that when I come back to this point, there's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 or whatever they had ordered tanks waiting for me there, so I know I can get all the way out. So our mission to start with was to bring in tanks for the divers going even further. That was the mission that we were given by command. Then after our first dive, as I said, we saw some of the procedures that they use in the cave were not cave procedures. So something we don't do in cave diving is, if I have something I don't need, I don't just throw it away inside the cave. We never do that, not only for environmental concerns, but also because a bit of rope or whatever can be floating in a cave, that can kill a diver in the worst case scenario. So, and we saw that there was problems with the way that the line had been laid. There was electric wires, some of them were live. There was plastic bags and all kinds of debris, some of it brought in by us, the rescuers. Some of it has probably been in there for years, and now with the water come out, it all get loosened. So our mission was two. It was one, to do what we were asked to do, bring in tanks. Secondly, it was to make the route as safe as possible. It meant to take debris and making sure there were no live wires in the water and stuff like that could create troubles for us. Yeah.
I feel like you made that sound pretty easy.
That was the easy part.
Can you just describe, when you say take tanks in, so let me just paint the picture. You're already wearing 3 tanks. How much does a tank weigh?
Well, again, it weighs about 15 kilos above the surface, but underwater we have some magic, and it doesn't actually weigh anything underwater.
So as well as the 3 15-kilogram tanks that they're carrying, because not all of it was under the water, there was a lot of walking in between sections. Yeah. You were carrying in bundles of 3 tanks, right? So 45 kilograms of extra weight, as well as all your dive stuff. This is what these guys were doing for hours and hours on end. So when they're sort of saying, we're hungry and the food wasn't very good, there's a reason they're hungry, because it was bloody hard work. Some especially the out of the water work was the hardest, because when we are in the water, buoyancy helps us, and as Liam said, we did carry maybe not hundreds, 50 to 70 kilograms of equipment, but when you're underwater, you don't feel it. You have equipment that allows you to substitute the downforce of all this heavy equipment, and you don't feel it. The second you get out of the water, it's back to reality. Gravity is back there again, and now those 70 kilos actually weighs exactly 70 kilos. And the hardest for me physically was definitely getting into chamber 3, where the diving was where we started the diving, until at that point
The flooding started at Chamber 3, from Chamber 3 and all the way, pretty much all the way into Chamber 9, where the kids were. It was flooded. And climbing from the entry of the cave into Chamber 3, that took about 90 minutes. In complete darkness, you obviously had a torch, but complete darkness, it's cold, it's muddy, and as Bay said, there was some, you don't want to fall down there because you're not going to go up again. There was some steep, falls down everywhere. It was not easy, and it was definitely not safe if you fell. And that was incredibly hard. And we did the first day. The first day I went in there, myself and Eric, we carried everything we needed ourselves because nobody else did it. And that took pretty much all our energy. We had to sit and rest for at least, I think, 45 minutes before we could actually dive. Luckily for us, there were some pretty brutal military types there with much bigger muscles than us, and they had absolutely no issues putting 100 kilos on their back and just run in there, and they were much better at carrying heavy stuff than we were, and that made our mission much easier because after we started to work, especially together with the American team who gave us a hand physically, it really helped us. We could walk in just in our normal equipment, which is maybe 5 kilos of equipment, and then we had these humongous special forces carrying, I don't know how much they carried, but a lot more than I would ever.
The Australian Federal Police estimated that the Aussies, the Americans and the Thai Navy SEALs working together carried about 20 tons of equipment into the cave.
I wouldn't be surprised. It was a lot, much more than I think I did 200 kilos or something.
I can see Jim writing notes, and I'm sure many people have got questions. Can I prompt you, Ivan, to tell us about the first day of the rescues and give us a sense of what was involved in the rescue and also what it was like when that first boy came through?
Well, first of all, the day before the rescue, so the rescue started July 8th. The 7th was a non-diving day, almost. So we didn't dive, we didn't put in tanks on the 7th. What we did on the 7th was we went to a local school to start with, where we had some kids, the same size as the kids we were going in there to rescue, and that was something that we do in dive training normally. When you are starting a cave diving course or any other course, you don't start in the cave. You start outside the cave in a pool in a controlled environment so you can practice. And that's what we did. Normally we have a manual that tells you, okay, to do this, you do this, this, and this, and this. There is no manual for how to save kids from caves. So we had to go into the pool, all of us divers, and try to find out how do we actually do this? How are we going to connect with the divers, with the kids? What kind of equipment are we going to use? Are we going to swim 2 to 1 kid, 3 to 1, 1 to 1? All these questions had to be answered. And that was not an academic question. It was like, let's go in the pool and find out which method is the best and safest both for us rescuers, but also for the kids. So we spent half a day in the pool practicing different scenarios, practicing with different equipment setups. And then we did this rock drill together with all the rescue team, where we simply took the mission and we role-played it to try to find out, hey, is this going to work? Do we have enough tanks in this area? Do we need more divers over here? And we found some mistakes in the plan and we got corrected. And then July 8th, which was the big D-Day, started fairly early, 8, 9 o'clock or something, I think.
Yeah, the first team went in at 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, okay. And obviously there was a lot of pressure that day. All the other days, all I had to be responsible for was a few tanks. And worst case scenario, if I lost a tank, it's a 7,000 baht loss. And I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be charged for it anyway. So I didn't really I had my own responsibility, but I was carrying equipment. Tanks made of metal, who cares? On the 8th, we all knew that today is going to be slightly different because we're going to take the kids out, and that changed a lot. It puts a lot of extra pressure on you. So I remember going in there, remember all the preparation. When you have so much stress and so much pressure, you are not always as nice to your fellow divers as you should be. And I wasn't very nice and other people because the stress level was very high. So all the other days we've been jokingly, that day it was dead serious. And that creates some problems because people don't speak as good together when they have a lot of stress. So we were late that day. We were late about 45 minutes, getting all our equipment ready and getting into the cave. And the day before, I've lost my diving helmet. We have specifically designed underwater helmets. One of the things that makes them suitable for cave diving is they have absolutely no buoyancy. So they don't float and they don't sink. They just stay in the water. That's the kind of cave helmet we like. I lost that helmet the day before, so I borrowed another one, and that was not a cave diving helmet. That was a typically mountaineer helmet, and they are stuffed with what's called some kind of padding. So if you have an impact, nothing happens. That makes them incredibly floaty and absolutely not suitable for cave diving. And what happened to me is I'm going in, myself and Eric, we're going in. We are still bringing tanks in, and we are about to go into Chamber 6, where our mission for today is to sit at Chamber 6 and assist the divers and the kids when they get to that point. And I get caught. My helmet is very floaty, and I get caught in the cave itself. And it has a strap here, and I'm obviously holding the line. We can't see anything, so we hold our guidelines and kick in and out. And now I'm getting almost sucked into the cave, and the strap on my helmet is very tight, and I'm not able to breathe. I start to get sparks in front of my eyes, which I know what means. It means that your oxygen levels are going down to an area where you don't want them to be. I also know what it means if I let go of the rope. That is my guideline to out and in and everything. But I choose eventually, because I can't breathe, so I let go of the other hand on the guideline, so I have two hands, so I can get the helmet off, take a nice breath of air and find the helmet again and put it back on again, and everything is fine. Unfortunately, the rope is not there anymore. And I've probably moved maybe 2 meters. Okay. And again, back to training. This is something that we train again and again and again, because it is something that happens to cave divers. We do lose the line now and then. And what we are trained to do is, in most cases, is to sink down to the bottom, find some kind of fixed point, and then you have a small spool with about 30 meters of line, and you then connect to a rock or whatever you can find, and you then start to make some kind of search pattern in the hope that you'll find the main line. And I found the main line. It took me 45 seconds or something like that, and I was connected back to the line again, and I'm continuing into Chamber 4. I was diving together with Eric at this point, and he's behind me. Well, I think so anyway. What happened when I was looking for the line, somehow Eric managed to get past me. Very easy in 0 centimeters visibility to get past. So he's coming into the 4th chamber. We had a simplified rule that every time we came to an air chamber, we will stop up, wait for the other diver, make sure everything was fine, and then carry on. Eric comes into the Chamber 4 expecting me to sit there and wait for him, and I'm not, because I'm somewhere behind him now. And he chooses to carry on. Rightly, I would say, because he said, if Ivan had a problem behind me, he would have seen me. If he didn't have a problem, he would probably continue. So he chooses to continue. I come up, and I'm not expecting Eric to be there. I'm expecting Eric to come out of this little hole in a minute or two, because I'm expecting him to be behind me. And I sit there, I wait a minute or two, and there's no Eric. I think I wait 5 minutes, and there's still no Eric. And I should just have continued, because Eric is a very experienced diver. He wouldn't have, but I didn't. I chose to go back and look for Eric. And I remember coming up again into Chamber 3, and there's 4 of the American divers sitting there, and I look up at them, and they look at me like, "You are not supposed to be here." And I ask, "Any of you guys seen Eric?" And they tell me, "He's with you." I'm like, say something and not so nice, and I check my gas supply, and I don't have enough air to get back. So it takes me about 5 minutes or something to change my tanks and then swim back. And I swim fast. And that's one of the rules: we don't swim fast. Underwater, swimming fast creates problems. We create more carbon dioxide, which can affect the way we think and eventually can make us pass out. But I swim very fast, and to make a long story short, because it's about 90 minutes dive or something, I come in and I find Eric in the 6th chamber. He's sitting in there, and he's done everything. All her job in chamber 6 was to set up our little pit stop station, and he's pretty much done all the work already. And we sit next to each other and don't know really who to blame, me or Eric, but we're good friends. So after a few minutes of silence, we start to chat up, and we are sitting in this incredibly surrealistic situation, because while I'm an experienced cave diver, I've never ever tried to rescue kids from a cave. We didn't have anywhere to, hey, what should we expect? Are the kids going to come here in 5 minutes or 5 hours? How long is it going to take the other guys to do whatever they need to do? We had an idea, we knew the plan, but we also knew that with such a complex plan, the amount of things that can change during the dive or doesn't go as planned, it's a long list. It's a long list. So we are sitting there, me and Eric, and waiting. I don't know, maybe 2 hours or something, 1.5, 2 hours or something. Nothing happens. And then suddenly we see this brown glow in this cafe latte we are diving in, and a diver pops up, big diver, with a helmet on top, with 2 very powerful torches. It looks a little bit like a monster from a 1980s horror movie or something like that. And very wide, because we are all wearing side mounts, our tanks on the side. So you have this very bulky creature coming up. So it stand up, and then he's dragging something to the water like this. Again, like some axe chopping 1980s horror movie. He's pulling this thing into the water, and I know what it is. It's the kid, but what I don't know is if it's alive. And I think I'm about 5 meters away from the guy when I see, okay, bubbles are coming out from underwater, and I can see that the person is still breathing, and I was like, oh, yes. And then helping the diver. So the English divers, he's at this point, I think he's been diving for about 2 hours, 1.5, 2 hours, together in his own little world with whatever must have gone through his mind, taking care of this little person. And we gave him like 2-3 minutes rest, so he could change his own tank, and myself and Eric took over, helped the kid with changing the equipment, and dived or swam the kid about, I don't know, 150 meters to the next sump, to the next diving area, and then the diver then took over again. And that was our mission. We did that again and again. The first day we did it 4 times. There was a big gap between the second and the third diver. So the divers came roughly every 30, 45 minutes. And then between 3 and 4, I think it was, there was like almost 2 hours gap. Again, you can read why there was such a gap in the book. And you're very pessimistic in such an area, yeah? And we're like, okay, so who did something wrong? Is there a problem in there? Why are they not here? Everything else was every 45 minutes. Now it's suddenly 90 minutes. And when you're sitting in there with no communication, there was no way for us to communicate with the diver sitting 100 meters away from us. It's just not possible in such an environment. So you start to guess, and you start to think, and many times you think, okay, they probably killed each other. They're probably dead somewhere. Now we need to go in there and also find them. So that was our mission for that day. So bring in some tanks and then assist the extraction team as they came to our position.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, dramatic stuff. We've got a microphone there in the centre of the floor. If people want to ask a question, please do. Just give us your name and tell us who you are or what organisation you're from, and direct a question to the panel. Ivan, what was the biggest drama that you felt? That waiting?
No, I don't know if it's drama. The biggest, the scariest thing for me was I have to be honest, the cave itself, and I think many cave divers would agree with me, if it was me and Pei in there alone, it would have been just another walk in the park. It's not a good cave for cave diving, but it is definitely not intimidating to a cave diver. It's incredibly shallow. For those of you who are not divers, the shallower the water, the longer we can survive. And a cave that is 6-7 meters deep, we can stay there in for a long time before we get into trouble. So the cave itself was not a big challenge, but having to dive with kids at this age with absolutely no previous training, that scared the living daylight out of me.
When you saw that first child come in, you could see the boy was breathing, or did he have his eyes open?
No, I couldn't actually see the boy because the boy, it's a complete darkness, so I could see the English diver carrying something, but what made me sure that it was okay was I saw bubbles coming out of so the boy was breathing inside his full face mask, and that was all I saw. I couldn't see if he was in what condition it was, but he was breathing, and at that point of time, that was the best result I could imagine.
Right. And then so you were there for 4 of the first, what 13?
Yeah, so we took the July 8th, we took the first 4 kids, and then next day 4, and then final day 5.
Okay, and how did it feel that first night you get back? Great relief to think, God, we did it right, or?
Yes, it was a great relief that we had. I don't think I was the only one who wasn't sure that we were going to get everybody out. I think that was almost accepted in the team that this is not, cave rescue have happened before, but it happens with experienced cave divers going in and picking up other experienced cave divers. And some of them have been successful, some of them are not. I think I and many other people in the team, we looked at it and said, realistically, we're going to get some of them out, but not all of them.
Yes.
Because there's so many things that could go wrong. The temperature in there, as you've probably seen the kids in the video, they are incredibly tiny, and there's not much fat left on them. And being in the water for, what did it take, 4, 5, 6 hours? Hypothermia is one thing, and then the panicky thing. There were so many things that could. So I think we all was expecting that we're going to get some of them out, but probably not all of them.
Okay.
So seeing that the person, the very first person, still being alive and under the conditions, everything was fine. The diver was fine. Any problems with the equipment? No, everything has worked as planned. And the first kid we took out, there was no problems with him. We had some issues with some of the other extractions, but the first one was, you make a plan and, we did it. And that obviously gave a incredibly oh my God, this is gonna work. But I remember coming out of the cave that night, which was incredibly late. I think I was out 1:30, 2 a.m. or something like that. And obviously I was physically tired, but my brain was hyper. Okay, guys, we just did it. But then after I think a half an hour sitting and talking with everybody, and again, have to remember how we experienced this one was like an ant in the ant nest. I only saw what happened right around me. I didn't know what happened 200 meters away. But I think also dawned for us, hey, we have to go and do this again tomorrow. And again, the next day, and that was intimidating.
Yeah.
And that's something that John Volanthen said, that especially by day 3, so 8 boys were out by that stage, so the technique, the method that was being used obviously worked. And John said on that final day, there was a feeling that if this goes wrong, if my boy dies today, then this is on me, because it's obviously worked before.
Because it's proven already.
It's proven, and it actually just increased the pressure.
Right. Pei, what were the most dramatic things what are your strongest memories of that whole adventure?
My strongest memory at that time, I got yelled at many times from the commander, because since I was there for the first volunteer, and so I have a chance to interact with many different groups from the China, from Australia, from US, and from other volunteer groups that try to get in there. So since I have that relationship, I kind of, in a way, I'm kind of got to be a liaison between all those groups and coordinators and the basically founder of all the equipment, the specialized equipment that they want. So there's so many times, for example, on the second week when we have to prepare for the mission to extract them out, we have to prepare enough cylinder, we have to prepare for the spatial mask, we have to prepare for the oxygen to mix for those boys, because the boys have to breathe with the higher oxygen percentage in their tanks, not the 21% of air, right? So all of that we have to prepare, and all of a sudden some of the oxygen booster pump fails. So now they call me up, okay, how do you fix this? How we can find the people? Is one of those really stressful. And then eventually I'm able to find a new booster pump, because when you pump in the pure oxygen, you need a specialized equipment to slowly pump it into the compressed cylinder.
And that equipment is not designed to make hundreds of tanks a day. It's
Right.
designed to make 3, 4, 5 tanks a day. And we just had to, we had to make much more than 3, 4 a day.
And all those stress, and sometimes equipment come delay, so the commander called me up, so where's the equipment? I mean, and full face mask, I was able to gather all the different type of full face masks, the positive face masks that we need and other stuff, but then not small enough. So I think basically I call up and ask all the full face masks in Thailand that we can get. That's were there up in Chiang Rai at that time. So, and eventually, and a lot of time that I remember well the commander thought, which is he's the commander for the operation outside the cave. When the people start coming in, especially with toward the end of on the last week before the operations going to start, there's more local Thai volunteers is flowing to come in and try to get involved and all those stuff, and and all of a sudden, I don't know why, he kind of come at me. He asked, so who are these people coming from? He started yelling at me again. I don't know why. And I said, well, I don't know. They want to help. So he kind of told me to go, get them, to a certain place and all those stuff. So yeah, I think that's my most memorable memories. Getting yelled at.
I remember that too.
Was there also a feeling, though, that the world was watching? I mean, there was, many hundreds of journalists there. You're coming out, you've got TV cameras, you've even got interest from the palace. You must have felt, did you feel privileged to be on the inside of all that?
Well, not really, though, because at that time we were so focused and didn't think of much of anything at all, right? Because when we're working in there, most of the time we're working inside the cave. When we come out, then we just pack our gear up and then go back to our resort. We didn't think of those media until the end of the last day, that all of a sudden we don't know where all they came from, basically. Because from
we were there the whole time.
from the cave side, it's so quiet, and then all of a sudden I remember well at the last day when the mission was complete, because all the media, they got evacuated they cannot stay inside the cave, right in front of the entrance. They have to be some other place far away. So from the cave side to our resort is only about 10 minutes drive. And usually in a normal circumstance, I mean, for the first day that I was there and until the last day, none of the news media or anything, nobody show up. And then all of a sudden, I got to say at least like 10 or 20 news media already have the camera and everything, stay at the resort already by the time we get back. So that was kind of surprise.
Very good. Liam, you were standing out in the mud for a full week. What, 3 weeks there all up?
It was about 3 weeks all up, including the aftermath, yeah.
Okay. The first week, boring, nothing seeming to work out, or you think you're going to find they're all dead or something?
That was the suspicion when we went up there at the very start, that this was going to be a pretty grim story. I don't know if it was ever really boring because there was so much pressure and there was so many other people around. It was more of a challenge to try and find something new to say. Every hour that we had to do a new live cross. I spent most of the time, to be honest, kind of tethered to a camera doing live crosses at the top of the hour for TV, for the insatiable demand that was building day by day. So we didn't get to do much kind of reporting, but there wasn't actually much to do because everything was blocked off by that stage, and these guys were working behind the scenes doing their thing.
Okay. It suddenly, with that moment when John Volanthen and the others came out, you must have known then, God, we've got a story. What was your feeling then?
Yeah, I think that made things more serious, that such high caliber guys, I mean, it took a while to realize just how good these people were and what their involvement meant to the story, that these were the people that do the hardest cave rescues in the world, and that's why they've been called in. I think the morning that Pei was talking about, when all the media got moved from the mountain, we just set up this fantastic live spot. We had wooden pallets, we had a beach umbrella, we had a generator. We'd finally got organised, and then they turfed us out and we had to go 2 kilometres down the mountain to the bloody road. So as much as we weren't thrilled about that, there was a sense that, wow, okay, it's on, this is happening. And it was. That's when the rescue started. So, I mean, there was long periods of waiting and fairly mundane journalism work stuff, but the anticipation and just the natural drama of it, I think, kept everyone going. And keep in mind, this was a sea of mud. It was raining intermittently. It was hot and humid, as it always is. So it was challenging enough for those reasons. But there was a great atmosphere amongst the media. Everyone helped each other out. We were all obviously darting around trying to get comment from these guys, who mostly politely declined and waved us on. Ivan, you were one of the exceptions to that. You gave us a bit of time at the mountain, which was great.
Yeah. The as you said when you showed the clips, it sounds like the one of the big factors in this was the huge understatement about what had to be done to get those kids out. How long did it take to actually emerge about how heavily sedated they were?
I think it wasn't for weeks later, really. The whole thing was very sensitive. There was some wrong information put out at the time, whether deliberately or not, let's not say. And it wasn't really until Dr. Harris gave a lecture to fellow physicians and trauma physicians back in Australia, and someone thankfully videoed a clip of it and put it up on Twitter, I think it was. And that's when he talked about the cocktail of drugs that was used. And that's the first time we had actual factual information about what he did. And what we learned, that it was 3 drugs that were used. The first was an anti-anxiety pill, Xanax basically. And that was given to the boy when he was up at the top of the ledge, the muddy ledge. Once that had started to take effect, the boy would walk down, sit on Dr. Harry's lap, already dressed in a wetsuit, and the anaesthetist would give him 2 injections into his leg. One was ketamine to knock him out, and the other was an anti-saliva agent. And that was because something I would never have thought of, but quite brilliantly, the kids are going to be face down in a full face mask, basically with a plastic vessel underneath them. So if they're drooling, then they're going to be creating a drowning hazard in their own mask, the thing that could be keeping them alive. So that was the cocktail of drugs that was used. And we later found out from the divers and from John that the ketamine didn't last long enough. So it would last about an hour, but the diving part of the rescue would take about 3 hours. So each of the boys, at least once, sometimes twice, had to be re-administered with sedative. So the divers had pouches either on their wetsuit or attached to their cylinders with preloaded syringes of ketamine and a separate needle. that they somehow had to re-administer along the way. And Jason Mallinson tells a fairly dramatic story of one of the occasions when that happened, and he was sort of caught out. Ideally, it would have been at one of these stations where Ivan and Eric were, and they were prepared for that as well. Ideally. To help out. Ideally. Didn't always happen. And Jason says at one point with one of the kids that he had, the boy started to wake up, and he was in a part of the cave that had no banks on either side. It was just a flooded cave. It had an air pocket, so he was able to come up. But he had to have one hand holding the boy and keeping him down as he's starting to move, and with the other hand had to try and get these ketamine syringes, get the needle onto the syringe and jab him in the leg. And he said that there were wrappers and syringes floating around on the top of the water. It sounds like an incredible thing to pull off. And that was one of the dramas they had. Another was right near the end of one of the rescues. The boy was almost there, within a few hundred meters of Chamber 3, which was the end of the dive part of the rescue. And all of a sudden, I think it was with John's boy at one point, and the kid wouldn't move any further. And he had to basically plant the kid on the bottom of the cave and go back, feel along his body, and realize that he'd been entangled in a wire the guys were talking about, and had to cut that wire and then re-grab the kid, re-grab the rope, and continue swimming on. Unbelievable.
Thank you. We've got a question there.
Thank you very much. I got a couple of questions. First of all, this is a truly...
Can you, just tell us who you are? Give us your name, that's all.
Daniel. My name is Daniel from Rapid Asia. Truly a heroic effort. It's really interesting to hear this story. I live in Thailand, so we all heard about it, but to hear it from the people that were there and involved in it, it just gives it a very different sort of flavor. I want to ask maybe for the divers here. I'm a diver myself, but I'm not into this cave diving. But could you just give us a sense of how far in the boys were and the different stages, and how long you had to dive each stage, just to give us sort of a map of what you sort of had to go through? I think that would be very interesting. And secondly, how did this end up happening? I haven't really followed the story that much, but how did they end up entering into this cave? And was the flooding, was that expected, or was this kind of something that just happened as a freak event? If you could mention something about that. Thank you.
Liam, do you want to answer that second one?
Sure. So we thought at the time, we were kind of told there was this story that went out that we all dutifully reported, that they went in to celebrate someone's birthday, which wasn't really the case. Basically, this subgroup of Wild Boars from the Wild Boar soccer team, they actually didn't play for one team. They played for 3 separate teams across 3 separate age groups. But they were united by their love of going on adventures and their friendship with the coach, Coach Eck. And after soccer practice, most Saturdays, he would take them and they'd go to a swimming hole, they go bike riding. He was a really keen cyclist. Or in this case, they went to explore in Tham Luang. And several of the boys had been into Tham Luang before, but most of them hadn't. The coach had been in before. And it's a bit of a thing, like a cool thing to do if you're a teenager in Chiang Rai, to go to the end of the cave and write your name in the back of the cave, which is 10 kilometers into the mountain, by the way. So they didn't have time to do that, but they were going to have an adventure and go in. So that's the short answer of why they went in, was basically just on a afternoon adventure after soccer practice.
Okay, and how far in?
Well, when it comes to the distances, I think there's been many different distances mentioned, both in the different books and reports, and I think most of them have been over-exaggerated linear. So they're much longer in the reporting than they actually was. And that's not to make the story more cool or exciting, but I think it's just a misunderstanding. We don't do linear distance. We don't really care if it's 100 meters or 200 meters. What we care about is how much air do I need to move from this point to that point? How many minutes it's going to take? If it's 200 meters, or 2 kilometers, it doesn't matter to me. It's the time it will take me to move from this point to this point. So the distance we died, I think we probably rarely died more than maybe 500 meters a time. And you might say, well, walking down Main Street, Bangkok, 500 meters, that's nothing. No, it's nothing. But inside a cave where you can move as slowly as a few centimeters a minute, you're literally moving finger over finger. 500 meters can be 2-3 hours. And it's what matters to us is how much gas do we need to move. You know, we all our tanks come with a pressure gauge telling us how much is left in the tank, and that's what we base our distance, not the linear distance, but the amount of time and or air in this case that we need to move it. So to be totally honest, I don't know the distances. I don't think anybody knows. I think now there is some very precise Google Maps and so on. You can see it, but it was pretty. It took up to 4 or 5 hours to get all the way in. I think that's a better way to measure the distance than. So you're walking into Chamber 3. When I arrived, that was a walk. Chamber 3, you have to do one stage. It's a very small dive. What, 5 meters maybe, or something like that. It's a very little dive. Some divers even chose to do it without equipment. They just held their breath and went through, and it was possible for some people to do that. And then every these numbers, all these chambers that was named, so there was chamber 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all those chamber indicates that it's over water. Everything else was underwater. So chamber 4 was the first place after chamber 3 where you could go up and breathe the air. Chamber 5 was the first. After 4 you could go up and breathe the air. So there was 9 chambers. Well, chamber 1 and 2 when I arrived was above surface. So seven chambers.
What's the total distance?
If you're looking at the total distance from the chamber 1 is the entrance, right?
Yes.
Chamber 3 is where the inside command center. From the chamber 1 to chamber 3, that's roughly about 2.5 kilometers. And then from the chamber 3 to the chamber 9 where the boys were, it's another 1.8 kilometers roughly.
So over 4 kilometers. We've got another question there.
I'm a publisher here. The question is, which I have, which wasn't answered really. You describe all the problems you had to rescue them. How come that obviously an inexperienced group could go in there and in very far, and you described also that this is not a well organized cave. So how is it possible that this is allowed, that people can just go in and without any protection or any plans or whatever? So that's normally when we read about rescues, it's disaster, buildings collapse or whatever, or a ship sinks or something like that, but which is not avoidable. But this seems to be strange to me, that one guy and a lot of kids just walk in there, and you say a few kilometers, and without any experience, and you guys with all your experience, and you describe with all the problems you had to do that, and then somebody just can walk in and...
Okay, I think we've got an answer for that. Do you want
Well, actually, a few points that you need to understand first. All these boys are the local boys, all right? So think of it, the local boys, the cave is like their playground. Some of them, like Liam's mentioned, some of them there's been in and out there before. So it's not a strange place for them to go in there, right? So it's for a few of them, it's a challenge, and especially when they have a few kids and other kids that in their team member had never been in there. And think of it as like when you go to a college, join a flat party, right? You have to have the initiation for those boys. So it's one of those type of thing that They are local boys. Some of them they already been in there, used to the cave already, and they know where they're going well, right? They know what to do for the preparation. And another point I want to make it they're quite aware that when they're not supposed to go in, because this cave is a seasonal cave. They know very well that when the July's come, 1st of July, that's when they're not supposed to go in. So usually they close from the July onward, because the local knows that at that time there will be heavy rain coming in and it will flood the cave, right? But the time that they went in, it's still June, middle of June. So they thought, okay, it's still safe, and they've been in there before. So I think it's for me, on my personal thought, was it just basically wrong place at the wrong time. They went in. The rain came early, and they got trapped.
And they walked in. They didn't dive in.
They walked in because it's all dry when they went in there.
They could walk all the way to where they were found at that point. And then the rain came, and walking was no longer an option. So they walked in.
And they were trapped not because the whole cave flooded, but because one particular choke point at the T intersection flooded. And it wasn't just water, but it was sediment as well that they couldn't push through. So that's where they actually went further into the cave than where they ended up, but they were coming back on their way out when they were trapped by the water. And I'll just add to that Vern Unsworth, who is perhaps best known these guys as the man who's having a little tussle with Elon Musk, but he's a cave explorer, not a diver, but a cave explorer based up in Mae Sai. He knows that cave as well as anyone. He's been in there so many times and has helped to map it. He was going to go on that Saturday to explore himself. He had all of his cave torches charging, so he was going to go into the cave, and he's an experienced caver. So the boys were, as they said, probably just unlucky that the heavy monsoonal rains came at the time they did. They were in the middle of the mountain, deep inside. They had no idea that it was raining, so no idea that the water level might be rising. Just bad luck.
And the cave is open to the public 6 months a year. Everybody can go there.
We've got another question there.
Hello. Hi, my name is Christina Falken. I'm a student at Chulalongkorn University here. I just have I haven't understood how you dive with an almost unconscious little boy next to you. Did you hold them? Were they strapped? Also, I was wondering about the limbs. When they're unconscious, don't they get stuck somewhere in the cave? I don't know anything about cave diving, but that's just comes up to my mind.
So none of us here, we did the diving with the kids. Both myself and Pei was in a support position. But the way it was done was that the kid was sedated enough to not move, and then he stops becoming a kid and it becomes a package. That you need to move from point A to point B, and that might sound very harsh, but if you start to think about this as a kid, then you are not in the right position. You shouldn't be in there. You have to look at it as a package that you need to carry out in the safest possible manner. But if you start to think about, hey, this is 11-year-old, this and this and this, then that's not the mindset you want to have in this. You have to be, I wouldn't say cold, but a little bit clinical when you think about what you're doing. Like many of the other cave divers, you can be emotional outside of cave, after the cave, and I think many of us it was a big thing for all of us. But inside there, when you are carrying the kid, it's just a package.
And just to pick up on the limbs question, the boys' hands were secured behind their backs with cable ties.
Okay. Robert.
Good evening. Robert Stockfist. I'd be very interested to know about technical question, please, about how you could coordinate the various volunteers that you had, about open circuit systems and maybe rebreather systems. How did you coordinate that? And also the mixture of the air that you use for the children to get them out.
Mainly, actually, at the beginning, we the first week we already know that this type of long distance we need a spatial equipment, what we call the rebreather or the closed circuit, right, to make the best. So we make a recommendation to the Navy SEALs, and by the Thursday, Thursday actually the Navy shipped 5 closed circuit rebreather that they have coming up, but they were reluctant to use it basically because one of the things, like I mentioned before, some of them they haven't been diving with the unit that as much, so they're kind of afraid to use in that situation. So it's we have the rebreather sitting there for a while, but they didn't actually using it until the second week. And as for the gas mix for the boys, we use 80% oxygen for those boys coming out, because from the calculation and from when we discussed with Dr. Harris, he recommended to, instead of just using 21% oxygen, which is the regular air, he recommended to use a higher percentage of oxygen because it's actually work better with the ketamine, with the drugs.
Thank you.
Okay, this is.
Hi, my name is Pode. What did the Thai government do right, and what did it do wrong?
Who wants
It's a
to answer
loaded
that
question.
one?
Be careful.
I feel I should probably take that on. I think the Thai government did a lot of things right. Obviously, this is a situation that can't really be planned for. This is a very specific set of circumstances. It's a rescue that has never been done before, exactly like this. So there was no way to anticipate it. I think one of the things the Thai government did right was to realise that this was beyond their capacity. And I don't mean to say that in a negative way. If it happened in Australia, then the Australian government would have to realise that it was beyond the Australian government's capacity. This was a rescue that required this very specialist skills of a select bunch of people. Dr. Harris is one of 2 cave diving anaesthetists in the world. So that's how specific we're talking. So obviously there was a lot of pride at stake, and the Thais led this operation from start to finish, and they wanted to do the bulk of the work. The Navy SEALs are a proud bunch of soldiers. But there was a realisation, I think, intelligently so, that we need to get the experts in to help us out here. And they made room for guys like the ones on the panel, and also the British divers that came over, who are sort of the best at this. They had an incredibly difficult job in coordinating all of the people involved. There were up to 10,000 people involved in the rescue at various points. Just feeding that number of people was a huge effort, which was mostly done by volunteers. So I think the Thai government, frankly, did a lot of things right.
What about wrong?
I was hoping you wouldn't notice that I didn't.
Can I give you an example?
Sure.
I don't want to put the boot in. I think you're right. I think they did do a lot of things right, and full credit to them. I at the end of where I live in Bang Nao, I can go up to a Navy base and I go for a run on the track there, and there's an old fellow, about 80 years old, who speaks English, and it was a little bit after the rescue, and I said to him, isn't this a bloody wonderful result? You know, what happened up there? I knew he was a Navy man, and he just looked at me and said, it was a disaster. And I didn't get the chance, actually. There were people beside him for him to explain, but shortly after, some of the complications, I suppose, became apparent. So I presume that what he was talking about was one, maybe the death of Saman, but then stories emerged of was it 4 SEALs caught there? Can you?
Yeah, there was 4 water irrigation guys who were, this is in the fairly early stages of I think think it was the search. I don't think the boys had been found. Have they been
No,
found yet?
no. It was, well, I was there, so I can
Please,
feel
yeah,
it. There was 4, because you have to imagine I think to answer what, it's not what they did wrong. I think they could done better for the first week, because on the first week, I frankly speaking, we are very unorganized. People going in and out without have the system to check how many going in. They didn't actually realize to do that until like toward on Thursday of the week already. So between Sunday when they start the operation to try to find the boy up until Thursday is actually virtually no organization, no system that going on. So on Tuesday, when we realized that the water actually came up so fast, rising up so fast, another idea that the local government they wanted to do and the Navy wants to do is try to pump the water out first, right? And so they have the volunteer of the underground water driller that in the area that they volunteer to. Hey, they have this high power pump, the submersible pump that they can go install and try to pump the water out from the chamber 3. So the team that went in there went in and working with us started installing the water pump, but unfortunately we couldn't get it to work until Wednesday. And then by the time on the Wednesday the waters come up so fast that I would call at that time it would be a puny small pump. It's not cope with a large amount of water that coming in. So even though we stopped finished the installation of the pump, it started but couldn't beat the nature. Basically the water is just too much. They couldn't pump the water out and fast enough, and so we have to evacuate out from the chamber 3. So when the Captain Anand, he's in charge of chamber 3 at that time, he told us to start evacuate, tell everybody to go out. I remember I was the last group that went out with the SEALs team, and I saw those 4 guys walking behind me. So we went out all the way to the second chamber, and then there was a plan to try to let's see if the pump was working again. So the SEALs team went in, and the other 4 actually the SEALs team told them to stay put. So we didn't know when they went back into chamber 3 again. So that's how they got stranded. And we did not know that they got stranded until John and Rick went in to the 3rd chamber on Thursday and found them. So they were actually in there for 1 full night. So
they took a nap.
Yeah, they took a nap basically.
And one of the Thai guys who was stranded inside the cave described the situation when Rick and John emerged. It was quite hilarious. They were obviously waiting for overnight, desperate for someone to come and help them, and they heard a noise in the water, sort of looking at this noise. And so one of the guys thought very helpfully he'd pick up a rock and throw the rock at the noise, and nothing much happened. So he threw another rock, and then the light got brighter, and John and Rick popped up. And, oh, it's divers there.
We got another question. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bev Frankel. One of the wonder that this went through so well, and the joy of all of that. I'm wondering what happened, why there wasn't more emphasis somewhere at the end on Coach Ake, because he sustained those boys when it was total darkness and over 10 days before they were found. And anywhere else, he would be a national hero for his ability to have stayed with those kids and given them hope, taught them meditation, had them dig a hole, whether it went anywhere or not. I mean, he was actually, I would think, should have been given more credit nationally as a hero. And I haven't heard anything quite like that. Why?
Well, in the early days that the search was going on, there were calls for Coach Eck to be prosecuted for negligence. And the police said they didn't deny that that was an option on the table. The families of the boys put that to rest pretty quickly. They knew his reputation. They knew how he looked after the boys and how they looked up to him. And so they were having no part of that. And I think, yeah, perhaps it didn't come out enough. But I totally agree with you that I think Coach Ek's role was crucial. He spent almost 10 years as a Buddhist monk and got the boys to meditate, to chant, and I think that brought them some sort of comfort in the cave, and at least kept them calm and kept their energy levels maintained. And even after they got out, I know from going up to Mae Sai myself and seeing the boys riding their bikes up to the temple where Coach Ek stayed on as a monk afterwards for a while, that bond that they had with him was still very strong, and they still really look up to him. So I totally agree. I think he is one of the heroes of the story.
I think that it may seem that there has not been a big spotlight on him, partly from what Liam says, but also the government has been very protective of these boys, and that's even still going on now, which you're seeing with, there are groups that are wanting to make, I think your story on the ABC website today, they're wanting to make movies about this, and yet the government is, it's not like America. They've come in a protective way and said, we're going to be part of these negotiations. We're actually going to take a chunk of the proceeds, but just try and make sure that it's done in the right way, which is, anyway, any comment on that?
That's absolutely accurate what you're saying, that the government has been controlling the boys and their families very closely. You can look at that in different ways. Maybe they're trying to protect them from the vulture media coming in. You could look at it in more negative ways as well. I know it's causing a lot of stress to some of the families, and they haven't really seen any benefits. A lot of people have made money from this situation. The families haven't really. There is, as I understand, they're getting closer to a deal with for a major Hollywood movie. That's down to a couple of big studios. But yeah, it has been very difficult to access the Wild Boars themselves, and especially the coach. And that also comes down to his nature. He's a very humble, reserved guy who chose to spend weeks and weeks back in the monastery as a monk afterwards, I think partly to shield himself from the attention that was coming towards him and the boys.
Okay. You're only allowed 2 questions, you know that.
What was the legal situation for the Farangs to help there? Did they have a work permit?
Well, I can only talk for myself. I have a work permit.
The 2 Australians involved, Dr. Richard Harris and Craig Challen, actually did have some legal backing. They both had diplomatic immunity. That was something that was organised before they arrived. And Dr. Harry also had to be certified as a medical practitioner in Thailand. And they actually arrived in Thailand and got to Mae Sai, and they were kept away from the cave site until that documentation was all sorted out. And that happened apparently within 48 hours, which, considering the weight of those 2 things, medical practicing and diplomatic immunity, is pretty extraordinary effort from the diplomats on both sides. The British divers, John and Rick, requested a representative from the UK embassy to come up to the mountain because they were really worried. They thought if this goes bad, then people are going to be looking for someone to blame. And as much as there was a lot of goodwill at the time, you could imagine that turning if all of a sudden you're talking about dead kids. So there was that concern that things could go wrong, and they got some embassy officials on the mountain. Beyond that, I don't know if there was any further legal structure around it.
One more question.
Hi, I'm Mariah Hugo, and I'm from Thomas Watt University. And to Mr. Cochrane, there were well over 700 journalists and other media outlets that were there. And you're all under the pressure of immediacy as well as accuracy. Can you expand a little more on maybe the relationships or the camaraderie that happened during all those 2 weeks and even after?
Amongst the media, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, generally you wouldn't expect that many journalists to get along, right? Fighting for the one story. But it was remarkably amicable. We were all sort of in the mud together, if you like. And so almost 100%, people were very, very helpful, very friendly. If your battery went dead and someone had a spare battery, they would help you out with it. It was that sort of thing. And I think it was also helped by the fact that we all kind of had the same story. You know, no one really had much of a scoop on the story that the boys are still in the cave and the rescuers are still trying to get them out, you know, variations on that day after day. So that helped, I think, that there wasn't huge advances in the story, and the competitive nature of journalists was probably sort of kept limited in that way.
Thank you.
Okay, just a couple of things before we wind up. You two, who did a great job, you haven't told us much about yourself. Now, Ivan, I know you're from Denmark. Can you just give us a little bit of background or anything else you want to say before we wind up?
I'm from Denmark.
Yeah.
Well, I'm from Denmark. I came to Thailand the first time in 2006 on a holiday. I had a good friend. He got married to a lovely Thai girl back then. And I went down there to participate in the wedding. And I ended up, after the wedding and all the shenanigans, I ended up on Koh Tao, where I live today. I dabbled in diving back home in Denmark, but I was not a real diver. So I had the opportunity of taking a dive course on Koh Tao. I did. And that changed my life. I got sucked into diving. 6 months later, I met my girlfriend, and that was it. I went back to Denmark. I had a good job and an apartment, everything, sold and quit whatever I had in Denmark and took whatever I had and moved to Thailand permanently in 2007. And I've been working in the dive industry ever since. Today, I own a specialized diving center on Koh Tao, which is very famous for beginner divers. I offer the absolute opposite, this kind of diving that we do. So not for beginners, not for beginners.
Thank you. Very good. Pei, you grew up in the US. That's how you've got such very good English, is that right?
Yes. Well, actually, I born in Bangkok, Thailand, but I would say I wasn't a really good boy at that time. That's why the reason I moved to the US and grew up there in Michigan. Actually, I moved to the US since I was 11, and I graduated. And actually, my first experience to dive is over 20 years ago, back in the cold water of Lake Superior in Michigan. So that's how I get my first experience, and actually. And I graduated and working for General Motors, and actually I'm still working for General Motors right now. So diving is my passion. It's something that I would like to do. So from recreational diving, I move on to become the dive master, instructor, get into the technical diving, like to challenge myself, and that's how I end up doing right now, basically.
Did you, when you say you graduated, did you do a university course?
Yes, I graduated from the Lake Superior State University.
Okay, and what was your topic, your subject?
I graduated with computer science, computer engineering, robotics engineering.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And Liam, we're not going to have you for much longer, very sadly. You're heading back. Yeah, how does it feel? You must feel glad you got a very good big story here. How long have you had here now?
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. So I've been here for just over 3 years now, and I'm starting to wind up my posting. I'll be heading back to Australia mid-year, and it does feel like going out on an incredible story, you know. And I think that's probably why a lot of you are here today, is that it was so dramatic, but it was also that sort of feel-good story that brought everyone together. It was sort of, it sounds like a cliche, I know, but it's what the world can achieve when everyone gets together and works in one focused direction. And to finish on that kind of note, at least this stint in my career has been fantastic. A lot of people write books about pretty negative, grim things, and now that I know how much effort is involved in writing a book, then I'll try and choose happy subjects from now on.
Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, could you put your hands together for this panel?